Hey everybody, Jordan Rosenberg here from Beerman welcoming you to our webcast. I'm joined today by Danny Roseth, who is my resident accountant and CPA at Roseth and Associates. So welcome, Danny. Good. And we're here today because I've been getting a lot of questions as a divorce lawyer about the CARES Act and what that means for my clients and for individuals and for small business owners and so forth and so on. And so me not really being a technical accountant who knows the intimacies of the CARES Act, thought I'd reach out to Danny and hopefully he can help shed some light on what that means for a lot of our clients and people. So Danny, just to start out, so like I said, a lot of our clients are small business owners. Can you just generally tell us what is the CARES Act?
Absolutely. So the CARES Act is the biggest stimulus package that's existed in our lifetime. It was created in response to this coronavirus pandemic, and it's the biggest inflow of cash to small businesses and individuals that we've ever seen.
So let's start with small businesses. And so what does the CARES Act mean for small businesses? What are small businesses' options and what's available to for some relief during this time?
Sure. So there's a few things out there. There's a lot of points of the CARES Act, but the main issues kind of that we're seeing and that we're really dealing with now with a lot of our clients are the following. And what I'll start with is the Payroll Protection Program, abbreviated to the PPP loans, as you may hear them. So this is kind of the biggest thing out there. And then what you're may have heard about it just today, it was more funds allocated to that to go to small businesses. And this is a loan where the intention of it is to keep people employed, to keep them working, and to keep their salaries where they were at, essentially.
So there was a second wave, Danny?
This is the second wave. The first wave got gobbled up very fast. And you're seeing now some people even, some of the bigger ones who took some big chunks of this paying it back even. But yeah, this is the second wave now. And the starting point for everybody is to talk to your bank. Get the application together and talk to your bank because that's where you apply for.
Got it.
So essentially what it is you can get a loan for 2.5 times your average monthly payroll. It's based on the payroll costs of the company. Like I said, you got to apply with your bank, talk to them first, find out what they need to apply, what documents they're going to request, and then it's a conversation of gathering that and working with your accountant probably to help obtain these documents that are needed to apply. And like I said, this is the second wave. Do it sooner than later because who knows how long this second wave will last and if there will be any more following.
Do you know if you're required to report on exactly what you're using the funds for, or is it just sort of like is it self-accountability basically? Yeah,
so it is very specific, and we haven't gone through the process yet, so there's still a little bit of some things certainly aren't 100% clear yet, but here's what we know, and like I said, the intention was to keep people employed and pay them. It's 2.5 times your payroll, and what the funds can be used for once you obtain them is to cover the costs of salary, mortgage interest, rent, and utilities. At least 75% of the funds that you receive need to be used towards salary. And assuming this is all done as it was intended, 100% of the proceeds that you receive from the loan should be forgivable. Forgivable. So essentially free money. Now, in order to do this, what we've been recommending is keep your records as clean and organized as you possibly can be. We don't know exactly how the forgiveness process is going to work, how scrutinized everything will be, and what documentation will be ready for that or needed for that. So when that point comes, you want to make sure you got all your ducks in a line and everything's as clean and organized, and you can show here's exactly what we spent and what we spent it for.
Interesting. So you can't just take money and say, okay, I want to buy a new house with my PPP loan. It's got to be for a business-related purpose, and you got to have presumably the documents to back it up when it comes tax season and you're filing your returns.
Those four things before even tax season: salaries, mortgage interest, rent, and utilities. That's what it needs to be for, and that's in order for it to be forgivable. And when the forgiveness process comes into play, it doesn't necessarily align with when you file your taxes. Rather, it'll be probably after. One thing I failed to mention there: when you get the funds, you have 8 weeks to use them. So the expenses incurred within this 8-week period. That's what the intention is for, to cover us through this pandemic and keep people employed during that.
Got it. And as you said earlier, there's a second wave, so there's more funds available. So guys, go talk, everybody who's
Get in
owns a little
line.
second, get in line. Exactly.
I know people who have been talking, we've been getting reports today of people who've gone to their bank, and the bank's response has sometimes been, we're not even taking new applications. Even though there's more funds, we still got to process those that we didn't get a chance to with the first wave. So
Wow.
get up in order and get that process started, because we have talked to others who they've been approved, they've been funded, and now it's a process of using the funds correctly to ensure the maximum forgiveness available. And if it doesn't get forgiven, then it's not like a terrible case scenario. If it's not forgiven, if for some reason you're allocated more funds or you receive more funds than you're able to use for the required needs, then you're stuck with a repayable loan at 1%. It's not a terrible case if you can't get the full 100% forgiven.
Got it. So what determines whether or not the loan is forgiven or not? Is it a situation where if you don't use the funds in 8 weeks, then the balance is not forgivable? Or how does anyone make that determination of whether or not they're forgiven or not?
Exactly. And that's kind of what it'll come down to, the process that we haven't been through yet. But when you go back to the SBA to say, okay, here's exactly what I used the funds for, and you didn't use all of them for the required purposes that they're needed for, then they kind of have the final say as to, do we forgive all of this or some of it, or maybe you received it and you cut your employment or the salaries by more than 75%. This reduces the amount of forgiveness that you could receive. So there's a handful of varying factors there, but that's why we say, understand what it needs to be used for, talk to your accountants, and make sure you keep it clean and organized so you can potentially obtain that 100% forgiveness.
Good advice. And just like every divorce is unique, I'm sure every tax situation is unique. So don't take this as the law, and make sure that you're running everything by your accountant and your financial planner so that you can take full advantage of these loans. So
Sure. Yeah. So
let's kind of switch over to people who don't have small businesses, because a vast majority of my clients also do not have small businesses, and they're just sort of regular people like you and me. And there's this CARES Act, which we've been talking about, that also has some provisions as for regular people, and those with retirement accounts, and those who don't, and those who earn a certain income, and those who don't. And there's certain benefits available to those people. So Danny, can you tell us how the CARES Act affects people individually?
Sure. So there's a few key factors to kind of touch on, and I guess the first that people are probably starting to see already are these stimulus checks. Those started going out just recently, maybe within the past week. Maybe you've already received it. It's $1,200 per qualifying individual. So if you're married joint, it's $2,400, and $500 for any qualifying dependents. You may have already received these checks if your income was below certain thresholds. As it raises above them, it starts to phase out. And it's based, if you haven't filed 2019 tax returns, it would be based on your 2018. If you do qualify for either 2018 or 2019, you should be getting it. So if you haven't received it yet, we're getting a lot of calls right now or emails from people saying, I haven't received it yet, I should be eligible, and they get a notice when they go check saying that the payment can't be, they can't get information on it yet. And basically, if you're eligible for it, you should get it. As to when you're going to get it, we don't have that answer yet. But whether it be in the coming days, weeks, months, or when you file your 2020 tax return, potentially, you should still be entitled to these checks. So that's kind of number one. The next big thing, I guess, would be as
well,
it
let me
relates
stop
to
you, Danny. Let me stop you. So,
Sure.
of course, everyone's question is, when am I getting this check? When am I getting this check? When am I getting this check? Right. So, if I read correctly, you're going to get it to whatever bank account you usually get a refund to, if that's into your return. Otherwise, you actually get a physical check.
That's right. If you're set up for direct deposit, and that's been what's filed on your return, it should be automatically, it should just show up in that account. If you're not, you can go online. It's irs.gov. If you haven't filed and never put in this bank account information, and I believe you could update it there too if you're looking for the direct deposit, but otherwise, yes, it would be a physical check.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Go on.
Yeah. So the other thing I was going to do then was retirement, and there's some big components to that within the CARES Act as well. The first thing is, for those who are at the age that are taking required minimum distributions for 2020, you don't need to take them. This could be big for a lot of people because that's a big taxable number for a lot of people who have to take their RMDs. In the 2020 year, they're allowed to just leave it there and not take any distributions from their retirement account. The next thing that relates to retirement accounts is the waiver of the 10% penalty on early withdrawals. If you're typically in the past, if you're below the retirement age and you pull from a retirement account, it's going to get hit with a 10% penalty. That's been waived now. And in order for it to be waived, you have to be a qualified individual. It has to be a qualified coronavirus distribution. And from what we currently know and understand the way it's written, that seems to really apply to everybody.
Well, let me stop you there. Let me stop you there, Danny, because a lot of our clients, in any situation, whether you're going through a divorce or not, could use some extra just to do pretty much anything. And so that means, paying down student loans or just taking retirement money to pay attorney's fees. I mean, that's a case sometimes where we have to do in some cases. And so you were talking about this certain criteria, and you're basically saying that anyone, basically for any reason, so long as you classify it as a coronavirus related distribution, doesn't get hit with a 10% penalty?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's interesting the way it's written and what we know about it thus far. But basically, there's three kind of components for being a qualified individual. And that's either you have the coronavirus, or you had the coronavirus, a spouse or dependent has the coronavirus. And those first two, hopefully, most people don't qualify in those categories. But then the third, which kind of seems like a little bit of a catch-all, which is that if you're kind of adversely impacted financially, because of quarantine, because kids are at home, for a variety of other reasons that you're adversely financially impacted, which again, that's going to be the majority of people. And,
right.
The employers and those who administer the plans, this is based on the employees or the beneficiary of the retirement plans to make that determination. So most people we see are adversely impacted by this. So I believe would qualify for this waiver of the penalty. So yeah, I mean, beyond it being the penalty being waived, there's other benefits to it that are really great from a tax perspective. Number one, if you intend to take this and keep this distribution, it's treated as taxable over a 3-year period. So let's say, for example, you pull out $30,000, that's $10,000 in this year, $10,000 in next year, $10,000 in the following. So it kind of smooths that tax hit out over that many years.
So a couple questions, Danny. So number one is just kind of going back to this distribution without the penalty. How is that going to be tracked, or how is that is that again just some sort of self-accountability where at the end in tax time you're just kind of saying, yeah, I needed the money for some coronavirus, financial related purpose? I mean, how do you have any idea how that's going to work?
Not with 100% clarity on this one either, unfortunately. But what we imagine it would look like is, number one, you're going to receive a 1099-R that reports this distribution. And the code that's labeled on it, early distribution is normally code 1 or something. A normal distribution is code 7. The code would probably be applicable to this, to have it be not subject to that 10% penalty, number one. And then I imagine there's something on our end when we're preparing the tax returns and entering the information in our software that we have to notate to make sure it's treated the right way. But it's not, it's interesting because it beyond it being taxable, it could be repaid over 3 years, which is my other point too, where none of it is taxable. So not only is it not subject to the 10% penalty, but if it's repaid, then it's not taxable. And you have a 3-year window to do this. So if your intention is to repay this amount that you take, so let's say, you know, again, that same example, you pull out $30,000 and at the end of this 3 years, you repay it, then none of it should be taxable. And while you're going to get a form in the current year, I imagine you wouldn't report that as taxable in that year because the intention is to repay this. Now, if you don't, I imagine you have to go back and amend returns to correctly reflect it, but it may not, none of it could be taxable if you plan to put it back in.
Very interesting. So just kind of breaking that down for our listeners. So number one is there's a possibility that you can pull out retirement without the 10% penalty. That's number one. Number two is that if you do pull it out without the 10% penalty, there's also this tax issue, which you said you could defer taxes for up to 3 years. Does that mean, is it something where in the third year you can claim taxes, or do you have to distribute it evenly over 3 years? Can you pay some of it or claim some of it in taxes in year 1, year 2, year 3? Does that have anything to do with it? Have you guys heard anything about that?
I guess it depends on your intention. If your intention is to take this money and spend it and use it and not pay it back,
right,
then you should account for it in ratably over the 3 years. So you take out 30, you plan to keep it and not pay it back, pay tax on 10,000 in the year you take it, 10,000 in the following, 10,000 in the year after that.
Got it. But alternatively, if you have an intention to repay it, it's basically an interest-free loan from any qualified retirement account. Am I right?
That's right. Yeah. So I mean, yeah, if you're planning to repay it, then exactly as you said.
Very good. Any other benefits to individuals that we can talk about, Danny?
A small one. The only other thing that I think is worth kind of mentioning here is the above the line charitable contribution. Obviously in this time, there's a lot of people who are in need and there's certain incentives and everyone should be thinking about that. But in the past, you know, charitable contributions were an itemized deduction for a lot of individuals. Now with the new standard deduction, they would get no benefit from making a charitable contribution because their standard would be more than the itemized. Now there's a new $300 above the line charitable deduction that anybody could take. So anybody could benefit from charitable contributions. Just not that we need more incentive to donate at this time, but that is out there as well.
Got it. And so just kind of wrapping up. And so does the CARES Act involve, did the CARES Act actually extend the tax deadline? Was that something separate? And if so, when do we file our taxes? When do they due?
That's right. We didn't touch on that. It has extended it. July 15th is the deadline. That is what the deadline has been pushed back to for filing for paying your 2019 taxes. I believe almost all states has conformed to this where they're following suit. I can't speak 100% on every state. I know Illinois is also July 15th. That is also the deadline for if you're one who makes estimated payments. The first and second quarter federal estimated payments have been pushed back to July 15th. States, however, I don't believe all of them have conformed to that. I know Illinois, for example, your 2020 first quarter estimate would have still been due April 15th. There are some variations how that's calculated, but yeah, there's definitely been a pushback on the due date of when you need to file and when you need to pay. Now, I would still say, and this is what we've been telling everybody, if your info's ready, get it together, get it processed sooner than later. I don't know.
That's probably to save some sweat off your back with the second resurgence of tax season, right?
We weren't looking to be in busy season in the middle of July, but basically the reason I say that is it gives you more clarity and it gives you more options. Even if you file right now, the payment's still not due till July 15th. So to avoid any sort of surprises or rush come July, if you can get your stuff together now and get it prepared at least, and filed if completed, and you owe a balance, you still have to July to pay.
Very good. Well, Danny, thank you so much for your time today. That was an awesome little primer on the CARES Act, and just kind of looking out for everybody on the front lines right now. And there's a lot going on, and we're lucky enough to be sequestered here in our home offices and removed from that. And hopefully everybody's sort of on that same page as well and staying safe. Any questions with any divorce-related issue as it relates to the CARES Act, feel free to reach out. Jordan Rosenberg, Beermann Law. That's BEERMANN law.com. You can also reach me at 312-262-2567, again, with Danny Roseth of Roseth and Associates. Danny, you want to share your phone number in case anyone wants to reach out to you?
Sure. You could reach me. Our office line is 847-597-1970. I'm available. Feel free to call with any questions that you may have with this or anything else tax or accounting related. And my email is danny@hdrcpa.com.
Very good. Well, Danny, thanks again. And everybody out there, stay safe.
Thanks for having me.